The alarm had been screaming for 10 minutes when Chief Administrator finally silenced it. There was no point in letting it continue. Everyone on the colony already knew what was coming. They were here, and death was coming with them. Stood in the central plaza of the mining colony on 7, looking at the faces of her people. 3,000 lived on this small moon. Miners, engineers, families, children. They had come here to harvest the rare crystals that grew deep beneath the surface. They had come here to build lives. Now they would die here. They were an insect-like species with 4 arms and large compound eyes that reflected the dim light of the plaza. They were not warriors. They were builders and craftsmen, known across the galaxy for their patience and their skill with delicate work. Their bodies were not made for fighting. Their culture did not celebrate violence. When danger came, they called for help and waited for stronger species to protect them. But help would not come in time. The nearest fleet was 18 hours away. They would arrive in 2. Commander approached with heavy steps, led the colony's defense force, a group of 40 guards armed with basic energy weapons. They trained for emergencies and small threats. They were not prepared for a raiding fleet. "How many ships?" asked. 7 said. Her voice was steady, but her antennae trembled with fear. "Our sensors show at least 2,000 warriors aboard, maybe more." Closed her eyes. 2,000 against 40 guards. The math was simple and terrible. There were slavers and hunters. They took other species for labor and for food. They showed no mercy because they felt none. To them, other beings were simply resources to be harvested. "We sent the distress signal?" asked. "Yes, hours ago. No one can reach us in time." Nodded slowly. She had known this would be the answer, but she had hoped anyway. Hope was a stubborn thing that refused to die until the very end. She turned to face her people. Thousands of had gathered in the plaza, drawn by the alarm and by the rumors that spread faster than any official message. Mothers held their children close. Workers still wore their mining suits, covered in crystal dust. Elders stood with quiet dignity, their long lives now measured in hours. "My people," said, and her voice carried across the silent crowd. "You know what approaches. They will be here before our fleet can arrive. Our guards will fight, but we cannot win. I will not lie to you about this." A low sound of grief moved through the crowd. Some wept, some held each other, some simply stood frozen, unable to accept what they were hearing. "I know this is not the ending any of us wanted," continued. "But we face truth with open eyes. If we cannot have more life, we can at least choose how we spend the life that remains." She raised all 4 of her arms in the traditional gesture of farewell. "Let us sing the songs of ending. Let us hold our loved ones close. Let us say the words we always meant to say. They can take our bodies, but they cannot take the love we share in these final hours." Around the plaza, voices began to rise in the ancient songs. The melodies were sad but beautiful, passed down through generations for moments exactly like this. They had faced extinction before, long ago on there. They had learned to find peace in endings, to treat death not as an enemy but as a door to the next existence. Sang with her people, her voice blending with thousands of others. Tears ran from her compound eyes, leaving wet trails on her face. She thought of her own family, her children who had left the colony years ago to study on the. At least they would live. At least some part of her would continue. Commander did not sing. She stood at the edge of the plaza, watching the sky through the transparent dome that covered the colony. The ships would appear there soon, dark shapes against the stars. She had already given orders to her guards. They would fight until the end. They would make the pay for every life they took. It was not much, but it was something. An hour passed. The songs continued, rising and falling like waves. Some colonists returned to their homes to spend their final time in private. Others stayed in the plaza, finding comfort in the crowd. Children played between the adults, too young to fully understand what was happening. Their laughter mixed strangely with the songs of death. Then saw them, dark shapes entering orbit, growing larger against the stars. 7 ships, just as the sensors had shown. They had arrived. "They are here," announced, and the songs faltered. Fear replaced peace. Some colonists screamed. Others ran, though there was nowhere to run. The guards moved to their positions at the colony gates, weapons ready, hearts pounding. Walked to stand beside. Together they watched the sky, waiting for the landing ships to descend, waiting for the end to begin. But then something strange happened. New shapes appeared in the sky, not from the direction of the fleet, but from somewhere else entirely. Small objects, falling fast, leaving trails of fire as they burned through the thin atmosphere. "What is that?" asked. Checked her scanner, then checked it again. Her antennae went rigid with shock. "Pods," she said. "Drop pods, hundreds of them." "From where? Who sent them?" Before could answer, the pods struck the ground around the colony. They hit hard, throwing up clouds of dust and rock. The colonists screamed again, thinking this was some new weapon, but then the pods opened. Soldiers climbed out. Tall figures in heavy armor, carrying weapons had never seen before. They moved with speed and purpose, spreading out to form a perimeter around the colony. In less than 3 minutes, they had established defensive positions at every approach. Stared at them. She had heard stories about this species. Everyone in the galaxy had heard stories, though few had actually met them. They were new to the galactic community, admitted only 30 years ago. They came from a harsh world, a planet of extreme conditions that had forged them into something strange and frightening. They were humans. One of them approached the plaza. He removed his helmet, revealing a face covered in sweat and dirt. His eyes were calm despite the chaos around him. He looked at and then smiled. "We heard you needed help," he said. "Point us at the bad guys." Above them, the landing ships began their descent. Below them, 200 human soldiers checked their weapons and waited for battle. The songs of ending had stopped. No one knew what to sing now. Lieutenant Danny Cole had made orbital drops before, but they never got easier. The feeling of falling through fire, sealed inside a metal coffin, trusting that the landing systems would work properly. Every drop felt like dying and being reborn on the other side. Climbed out of his pod and immediately began scanning the area. His soldiers were landing all around him, 200 men and women of the 47th Rapid Response Unit. They had been on patrol when the distress signal came through. Human High Command had taken less than a minute to authorize the intervention. The Galactic Protection Accord gave them the right to assist any species under attack by hostile forces. They did not need permission from the government. They just needed to move fast. "All units, report status," Danny said into his helmet communicator. The responses came quickly. No casualties from the drop, all soldiers accounted for, weapons functional, perimeter established. Sergeant Maria Santos jogged up beside him. She was the unit's combat medic, a small woman with quick hands and a calm voice that could steady a dying soldier. "The colony is intact," she reported. "Civilians appear scared but unharmed." "Good, let's keep it that way." Danny walked toward the 2 alien figures standing at the edge of the central plaza. One wore what looked like an administrator's robes. The other wore armor and carried a weapon, clearly some kind of military officer. Both of them stared at him with huge compound eyes that reflected his own face. "I am Lieutenant Danny Cole," he said. "Earth Defense Forces. We received your distress signal and came to assist." The officer spoke first. "I am Commander, this is Chief Administrator. We did not expect anyone to respond, though we'll have thousands of warriors." "We noticed," Danny said. "How long until they land?" "Minutes, perhaps less." Danny nodded. He turned to look at his soldiers, already digging in and setting up defensive positions. 200 humans against 2,000. The odds were bad, but he had faced worse. Probably. "Do you have any combat-capable personnel?" he asked. 40 guards. They are trained for security, not war." "They'll have to be enough. Bring them to me. We'll integrate them into our lines." Hesitated, her antennae twitched with confusion. "Lieutenant, I do not understand. Why are you here? You do not know us. We have no alliance with your species. We cannot pay you." Danny paused. He had heard this question before, from other species on other worlds. The answer was always hard to explain. Humans understood it without words, but other species seemed to struggle with the concept. "You were in trouble," he said simply. "We were nearby. That's all the reason we need." Stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and went to gather her guards. Administrator stepped closer to Danny. Her voice was soft and filled with something he could not quite identify. "Your species confuses me, Lieutenant. You came here to die for strangers. This is not logical behavior." "Maybe not," Danny admitted. "But it's human behavior. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a battle to prepare for." He walked away, leaving the administrator standing alone with her confusion. Corporal was already setting charges at the main gate when Danny arrived. Was the unit's demolitions expert, a big man with steady hands and a love for things that exploded. "I'm rigging the entrance with surprises," he reported. First wave that comes through is going to have a very bad day. Good, make sure you leave yourself an escape route. Always do, Lieutenant, usually. Private First Class Brooks had climbed to the top of the colony's tallest building, a storage tower near the center of the settlement. She lay flat on the roof, her sniper rifle already assembled and aimed at the landing zone. Through her scope, she could see the ships descending through the atmosphere. Multiple landing craft inbound, she reported over the communicator. First wave touching down in approximately 2 minutes. Danny gathered his officers around a small projection unit that displayed a map of the colony. Listen up. We hold the perimeter as long as possible. When they push through, we fall back to the secondary line at the plaza. Final fallback is the mining entrance. The civilians go into the mines if things get bad. Questions? What's our extraction plan? Someone asked. We hold until the fleet arrives, 18 hours. Silence. Everyone understood what that meant. 18 hours against a force 10 times their size. The math was brutal. Any other questions? Danny asked. No one spoke. Good, get to your positions. The soldiers scattered, moving to their assigned spots around the colony. Danny watched them go, feeling the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders. These were his people. Some of them would not survive the next 18 hours. He knew their names, their stories, their families waiting back home. The burden of sending them into danger never got lighter. Maria Santos appeared at his side. Medical station is set up in the community center, she said. I've got supplies for maybe 50 serious casualties. Let's hope we don't need them all. Let's hope. The first ships landed outside the colony's perimeter. They were ugly vessels, all sharp angles and dark metal. Ramps dropped open, and warriors poured out onto the rocky surface of the moon. They were tall creatures with gray skin and too many joints in their limbs. Each one carried a blade and an energy weapon. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never faced real resistance. Commander returned with her 40 guards. They looked terrified, their weapons held in trembling hands. Danny understood their fear. They were not soldiers. They had never faced anything like this. Stay behind my soldiers, he told. Watch what they do. Follow their lead, you'll be fine. You cannot promise that, Sid. No, Danny admitted. I can't, but I can promise that we'll fight beside you until the end. They began their advance. They formed into waves, hundreds of warriors moving across the open ground toward the colony. They did not use cover or tactics. They simply marched forward, confident in their numbers. Charges detonated first. The main gate exploded outward, catching the lead elements of the attack in a storm of fire and metal. Bodies flew through the air. The advance faltered for a moment, then continued. Danny raised his weapon. Around him, 200 soldiers did the same. Open fire, he shouted. The sound of human weapons filled the air. Energy bolts and projectiles tore into the lines. Warriors fell by the dozen, then by the score, but more kept coming, always more. The battle for 7 had begun. Danny looked at the endless wave of enemies approaching, then at the guards clutching their weapons behind him. He smiled grimly and kept firing. They had 18 hours to survive. He intended to make the earn every single minute. The first assault lasted 3 hours. When it finally ended, the ground outside the colony was covered with bodies. Hundreds of them lay where they had fallen, their gray skin torn by human weapons. The survivors had pulled back to regroup, leaving behind their dead without a second glance. Danny Cole walked the defensive line, checking on his soldiers. They were tired and bloody, but they were alive. Only 12 casualties so far, and Maria had managed to save 9 of them. The other 3 were wrapped in sheets near the medical station, waiting for the burial that would have to come later. The guards had survived as well. They stood at their positions with wide eyes, still processing what they had just witnessed. None of them had ever seen violence on this scale. None of them had imagined it was possible. Commander found Danny near the eastern barricade. Her armor was scratched and dented from where a blade had nearly reached her. A human soldier had pushed her aside at the last moment, taking the strike himself. Your soldier said, the one who saved me, is he alive? Private Graham, he took a bad hit but Maria patched him up. He'll fight again. Santini moved in patterns Danny did not understand. He pushed me out of the way. He did not know me. He did not hesitate. That's what we do, Danny said. We look out for each other. That includes you now. Was silent for a moment. Then she asked, what are you, Lieutenant? I have met many species in my life. Warriors, merchants, diplomats, but I have never met anything like humans. Danny thought about the question. It was not easy to answer. Humans were complicated. They could be cruel and selfish, petty and violent, but they could also be something else, something that other species seemed to find strange and wonderful. We're just people, he said finally. We get scared, we make mistakes, but when someone needs help, most of us can't walk away. It's built into us somehow. Before could respond, his voice crackled over the communicator. Movement in the eastern tunnels. Looks like they're trying to flank us through the mining network. Danny swore under his breath. Take a team and shut that down. On it, replied. Corporal gathered 5 soldiers and headed for the mining entrance. The tunnels beneath the colony were a maze of passages and chambers, carved over years of crystal harvesting. If they got through them, they could emerge behind the defensive lines and attack from within. Moved fast through the dark tunnels, his weapon light cutting through the shadows. He could hear the ahead, their strange clicking language echoing off the stone walls. There were a lot of them. Then he heard something else, smaller sounds, higher pitched. He followed them to a side chamber and found a group of children huddled in the darkness. They had been hiding here when the attack began, too scared to move. Hey there, said softly. It's okay, I'm here to help. The children stared at him with huge eyes. They did not understand his language, but they understood his tone. Some of them began to cry. Others reached toward him with their small hands. Looked at the children, then looked at the tunnel behind him where the sounds were growing louder. He had a choice to make. He made it without hesitation. All units, I'm collapsing Tunnel Junction 7, he said into his communicator. Got civilians here, going to hold this position until someone can extract them. Danny's voice came back immediately. That will trap you on the wrong side. I know, just send someone when you can. Pulled the charges from his pack and set them at the tunnel junction. Then he hit the detonator. The explosion brought down tons of rock, sealing the passage completely. The flank attack was stopped cold. But now was alone with 10 children and an unknown number of enemies in the tunnels around him. He found a defensible position in a small chamber and began stacking rocks to create cover. The children watched him work, their crying slowly fading as they realized he was protecting them. One of the smallest ones crawled over and pressed against his leg. Don't worry, he told the child. I've got you. Above ground, the second assault began. This time they came with more caution. They used cover, advanced in groups, and tried to find weak points in the human line. But the humans adapted too. Danny shifted soldiers to meet each threat, plugging gaps and reinforcing positions under pressure. Brooks lay on her rooftop perch, picking off officers one by one. Every time a leader tried to coordinate an attack, her rifle spoke and they fell. The enemy assaults became disorganized, broken into pieces by the loss of their commanders. Maria Santos ran between positions, treating wounded soldiers and alike. She did not ask who someone was before she helped them. She simply saw pain and fixed it. A young guard lay on a stretcher near the medical station, his side torn open by a blade. Maria worked on him with quick, sure movements, sealing the wound and stopping the bleeding. Why, the guard asked her, why do you help us? You could run, you could save yourselves. Maria looked at him with tired eyes. Because you needed me, she said. That's the only reason I need. The guard did not understand. He could see that her words were true, but he could not comprehend how any being could think that way. It went against every survival instinct he possessed. Yet here she was, risking her life for strangers, and she seemed to consider it the most natural thing in the world. Danny took a blade to the shoulder during a breach at the northern barricade. A warrior had gotten too close, slipping past the firing line. Danny shot the creature at point-blank range, but not before its weapon found his flesh. He stumbled back, blood running down his arm. A guard stood nearby, frozen with shock. Danny had stepped in front of the guard without thinking, taking the blow meant for someone else. Lieutenant, you are wounded, the guard said. Danny looked at his shoulder, then at the ongoing battle around him. I've had worse, get back to your position. He kept fighting. Maria would yell at him later for not seeking treatment. Right now, there was no time. The second assault failed like the first. More bodies joined the piles outside the colony, but the humans had lost more soldiers too. The numbers were shifting slowly in the wrong direction. Then's voice came over the communicator again. We have a problem. More ships just entered orbit. I count at least 5 additional landing craft. Danny felt his stomach drop. How many warriors? Based on ship size, probably 5,000 more. 5,000. Added to the survivors of the first 2 assaults, they would face over 6,000 enemies, with less than 150 soldiers still combat-ready. Danny looked at his tired, bleeding soldiers. He looked at the civilians huddling in the plaza behind them. He looked at the sky, where death was falling toward them. Then he started planning the next defense. Down in the tunnels, heard the getting closer. He checked his ammunition. He looked at the children pressed against the wall behind him. He would hold this position as long as he had breath in his body. The quiet hours were almost worse than the fighting. Waiting for death gave the mind too much time to think. Danny sat on an overturned supply crate, getting his shoulder wound properly treated while Maria lectured him about being reckless. He barely heard her words. His attention was on the sky, where the new reinforcements were still in orbit, preparing for their landing. Administrator approached him slowly. She had spent the battle helping to move civilians into the community center, away from the fighting. Now she stood before him with questions in her eyes that she could no longer hold back. "Lieutenant Cole," she said, "may I speak with you?" Danny waved Maria away and gestured for to sit. She settled onto another crate. Her forearms folded in what he had learned was a posture of deep confusion. "I have watched your soldiers fight," said. "I have seen them die for my people, and I still do not understand why. This makes no sense according to everything I know about survival and logic. You gain nothing from this sacrifice." Danny was quiet for a moment. He had thought about this question many times, tried to put into words something that felt as natural as breathing. "Let me tell you about my grandmother," he said finally. "When she was young, there was a great flood in her region. The water came fast and she was trapped on the roof of her home with no way to escape. She would have drowned." Listened with her antennae perfectly still. "But strangers came," Danny continued. "People she had never met from towns she had never visited. They came in boats and helicopters, risking their own lives in the dangerous waters. One of them was nearly killed saving her. When she asked him why he did it, he just shrugged and said, 'You needed help.'" Danny looked at his hands, covered in dust and dried blood. "My grandmother lived because of that stranger. She raised my mother, who raised me. Everything I am exists because someone decided that a stranger's life was worth risking their own. How could I not pass that forward?" Processed his words slowly. The concept was foreign to thinking. Their species helped each other, of course, but within clear boundaries of family and community. The idea of extending that protection to complete strangers to other species entirely was difficult to grasp. "You call this the right thing to do," she said, "but how do you know what is right?" Danny smiled sadly. "We don't always, we make mistakes, we're selfish sometimes, but most humans, when they see someone suffering, feel something inside that tells them to help. It's not always loud enough to hear, but it's there." Before could respond, a sound drew their attention. Maria was crouched beside a makeshift bed where a wounded guard lay dying. The guard was too badly hurt for Maria to save. Internal damage beyond her equipment's ability to repair. Maria held the guard's hand gently. The guard was young, barely an adult by standards. Fear filled her large eyes as she felt her life slipping away. "I don't want to die," the guard whispered. Maria leaned close. "I know, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't do more." "Will you stay with me?" "I'm not going anywhere." Maria did not know any songs. She did not know their customs or their beliefs about death, but she knew something that every dying person needs, the comfort of not being alone. She began to sing softly, an old lullaby from her childhood, simple words about stars and sleep and peaceful dreams. The melody was gentle and warm, carrying centuries of human love in its notes. The guard's eyes slowly closed. Her breathing slowed. Maria kept singing until the last breath faded, until the young guard slipped away with the sound of comfort in her ears. Around them, others had stopped to watch. They had never seen this before. Their species died among their own kind, surrounded by familiar songs and rituals. The idea that a stranger, an alien from another world, could offer such tender care in death was beyond their experience. Stared at Maria with something that might have been wonder. She did not know that guard, said quietly. They never spoke, yet she gave comfort as if they were family. Danny nodded. "That's who we are, that's why we fight." The moment was broken by the sound of landing craft descending from orbit. The third wave was coming. Danny rose from his crate and gathered his remaining officers. Less than 100 soldiers still stood ready for combat. The guards had suffered losses too, leaving perhaps 30 able to fight. "Here's the situation," Danny said. "They're bringing heavy armor this time, armored vehicles and air support. We're going to get pushed back. When that happens, we fall to the plaza. When the plaza falls, civilians go into the mines. We hold as long as we can." "How long until the fleet arrives?" someone asked. 12 hours, maybe 11 if they're pushing hard." The soldiers exchanged looks. 11 hours against 6,000 enemies with air support and armor. No one needed to say what they were all thinking. "Still trapped in the tunnels," Danny continued. "I need volunteers for a rescue team." Every hand went up. Despite everything, Danny felt a surge of pride. These were his people, exhausted, wounded, facing impossible odds, and they volunteered without hesitation. He picked a small team and sent them into the mines to find the children. The third assault hit like a storm. Warriors surged forward under covering fire from their aircraft. Armored vehicles rolled across the rocky ground, their weapons tearing holes in the human defenses. Danny fought at the front line, rallying his soldiers as positions fell. They gave ground slowly, trading space for time, making the pay for every meter in blood. Took down 2 aircraft before they found her position and forced her to relocate. She ran across rooftops, finding new angles, never stopping her deadly work. Maria had abandoned the medical station, fighting alongside the soldiers while still treating wounds between shots. She was not a warrior by training, but she had become one by necessity. The plaza line held for 3 hours before the pressure became too great. Danny gave the order to fall back to the mining entrance. The civilians were already moving into the tunnels, guided by volunteers. Then's voice crackled over the communicator. "Lieutenant, I'm going for their command vehicle." Danny's heart stopped. "Your injuries, the rescue team is coming." "No time. Their commanders are in that big vehicle at the rear. I take that out, they'll lose coordination. Might buy you a few more hours." "That's a suicide mission." His voice was calm. "Probably. Tell my folks I love them." The communication went silent. Through the smoke and chaos, Danny watched a small explosion blossom at the rear of the lines, then a larger one, then a massive detonation that consumed the command vehicle entirely. The assault wavered. Without their commanders, the warriors became confused and disorganized. They pulled back again, giving the humans precious breathing room. The rescue team emerged from the mines an hour later with 10 children. They had found the collapsed tunnel, but no sign of. Danny stood alone, looking at the burning wreckage where his friend had made his last stand. 58 soldiers left, 11 hours to go. He turned to Administrator. "Get your people into the deep mines. We'll hold the entrance." Looked at him, at the handful of soldiers still standing, at the endless enemy still waiting in the darkness beyond. "We will die here together," she said. "You taught us something today. We will not let you die alone." Danny Cole looked at his soldiers. 47 humans remained standing. Some could barely hold their weapons. Others were held together by bandages and determination. They had fought for 14 hours against impossible odds, and now the final battle was approaching. They had regrouped. Their new commanders had taken control, and their forces were massing for one last overwhelming assault. Thousands of warriors, dozens of vehicles, a wave of destruction that no defense could stop. Danny had ordered the soldiers to record final messages for their families. Small devices passed from hand to hand, each person speaking words they had always meant to say. "I love you. I'm proud of you. Take care of each other. Remember me." Maria Santos finished her message and tucked the device into her medical bag. She looked at Danny with tired, peaceful eyes. "No regrets, Lieutenant. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else." Brooks checked her rifle one more time. She had 17 rounds left. She would make each one count. Private Leo Graham stood at the front line despite his wounds, the same soldier who had pushed Commander out of harm's way hours ago. His hands were steady. His fear was gone. Then something unexpected happened. Administrator walked to the front line, carrying a weapon she barely knew how to use. Behind her came Commander, and behind her came more. Workers and farmers, parents and children, anyone who could hold a weapon or throw a rock. Over 200 civilians who had been hiding in the mines now stood in the open, ready to fight. Danny stepped toward. "What are you doing? I told you to stay in the tunnels." "You told us many things today," Lieutenant replied. "You told us that strangers can become family. You showed us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to face fear for others. We have learned these lessons well." "You'll die," Danny said. "Perhaps, but we will not hide while you die for us. Your soldiers have given everything for our people. We will stand with them at the end." Danny looked at the civilians, their weapons held in trembling hands, their eyes filled with terror and determination. They were not warriors. They would fall quickly against blades, but they had made their choice, and he understood why. "All right," he said quietly, "then we stand together." They began their advance. Wave after wave of warriors moved across the killing ground, supported by vehicles and aircraft. The ground shook with their approach. The sky darkened with their numbers. Danny raised his weapon. Around him, humans and did the same. 250 defenders against 6,000 attackers. The math had never been in their favor. It did not matter. "Hold the line," Danny shouted. The battle began. Weapons fire filled the air. Warriors fell by the score, but more kept coming. The defenders fought with the ferocity of those who have nothing left to lose. Maria treated wounds while firing, emptied her rifle and picked up a fallen soldier's weapon. Leo went down, got back up, went down again. Stood beside Danny, firing her weapon at the approaching horde. She was a terrible shot. She did not care. She was fighting for her people and for the strange beings who had come from the stars to die for them. The line buckled, defenders fell. The pushed forward, overwhelming positions through sheer weight of numbers. Danny took a blade to his leg, then another to his arm. He kept fighting. There was nothing else to do. Then the sky changed. New lights appeared above the colony, ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel, emerging in flashes of distorted space. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Warships, their sleek hulls catching the light of the distant sun. Commander looked up, her antennae trembling with hope and disbelief. The fleet, they're early. They pushed their engines beyond safe limits. The ships opened fire on the forces below. Orbital bombardment rained down on the enemy formations, turning warriors into ash and vehicles into molten metal. The assault collapsed into chaos as death fell from above. Landers descended from the fleet, disgorging thousands of soldiers. They hit from the rear, crushing the enemy between two forces. The slavers who had come to harvest began to run, to surrender, to die. Danny watched the tide turn from his knees. He could not stand anymore. Blood loss had taken too much from him, but he could see the victory unfolding, and that was enough. Maria rushed to his side, pressing bandages against his wounds. "Stay with me, Lieutenant, stay with me." "Did we win?" Danny asked. "We won, it's over." Danny smiled and let himself fall into darkness. He woke in a medical bay 3 days later. The fleet had proper facilities, and their doctors had worked alongside Maria to save as many humans as possible. 31 soldiers survived. 171 had died defending the colony. Among the dead were 3 whose bodies were never found. Private Leo Graham had been recovered, badly wounded but alive. Private First Class Brooks had survived with minor injuries. And Corporal had been pulled from the rubble of the command vehicle, more dead than alive, but somehow still breathing. Danny visited him in the medical ward, was wrapped in enough bandages to be mistaken for a mummy, but his eyes were open and alert. "You're an idiot," Danny told him. "Worked, didn't it?" replied. They sat together in comfortable silence. There was nothing more that needed to be said. Administrator came to see Danny before the fleet departed for the... She stood beside his bed with a formal posture that suggested something important was about to happen. "Lieutenant Cole," she said, "the people owe you a debt we can never repay. You came when we called. You stayed when we needed you. You gave us hope when we had none." Danny shook his head. "We just did what anyone would do." Antennae moved in a gesture he had come to recognize as disagreement. "No, that is not true. Most species would not have come. Most would not have stayed. What you did was extraordinary, and we will never forget it." She handed him a small crystal, beautifully crafted, glowing with inner light. "This is a memory stone. We have recorded everything that happened here. The story of 7 will spread across the galaxy. Other species will know what humanity did for us, what you are willing to do for strangers." Danny looked at the crystal. He thought about the 171 soldiers who would never go home, the families who would receive folded flags and empty words. He thought about the cost of doing the right thing. "I hope they learn the right lessons," he said quietly. "They will," replied, "because we will teach them." Months later, when the colony was rebuilt and life had returned to normal, they erected a statue at the colony gates. It depicted a human soldier reaching down to help a fallen to their feet. The soldier's face was not modeled on any specific person. It represented all of them. The inscription at the base was simple. "They came when we called. They stayed when we needed them. They are human." The news of Seven spread across the galaxy as it promised. Other species heard the story of the humans who had dropped from the sky to die for strangers. Some dismissed it as propaganda. Others investigated and found it was true. And slowly, the galaxy began to look at humanity differently. Not as the strange new species from the harsh world. Not as the dangerous unknown from the outer reaches. But as something else entirely. As protectors, as allies, as friends. Danny Cole returned to active duty 6 months after Seven. He led his soldiers on new missions, to new worlds, to new battles. He never spoke of what had happened on that colony unless someone asked. And when they asked, he always gave the same answer. "We heard they needed help, so we came. That's what we do. That's what humans do."